Today, our stock analysis will focus on the building supply company Builders FirstSource, ticker BLDR. This stock has had tremendous growth over the past few years, and we'll see if there's any opportunity left to invest. So let's take a quick minute and look at the financials first. Starting off with Builders first, we see the first three data points at the top being revenue, net income, and earnings per share are all down for the most recent year. However, each one is up significantly from 2014. Now, sure, we're starting at a low base from 10 years ago, but still very impressive, and this has been helped by recent mergers and acquisitions over the most recent years. Then moving on, dividends. They don't pay dividends, so we're going to jump down to the shares, and this is where they're returning value to shareholders. We can see starting back in 2022, a large amount of stock repurchases began, bringing the outstanding count down, looks like about 30%, and management plans to continue these repurchases moving forward. So a very good sign here if you're an investor, I believe. Then free cash flow, and again, tremendous growth over the last 10 years. And with this cash coming in like this, with over $1 billion for the past 3 years, they will be able to continue their share repurchases. So let's jump down now and perform a stock valuation. Here's the valuation setup, and we will look at a few other scenarios in a moment. But first thing I want to point out is up here in the top right, the net income CAGR and earnings per share CAGR over the last 10 years. Significant growth. We see net income grew at just under 64%, while earnings per share grew just under 60%. And we did see this when we looked at their financials, and a lot of this came over the last few years, helped by those mergers and acquisitions. So I don't foresee them growing like this over the next 10 years. So down here, we can see the short-term growth rate that I'm using is 13%. I believe this is a little more realistic, especially if you're bullish on home building and obviously building products. And this is the short-term growth rate I use for one of my home builders, Pulte Group. So I am comfortable with this, and I do think this is going to be a hot market for several years to come at least. And I know there's some out there that think home building is still going to be a hot market for at least 10 years or more, especially if the interest rate drops. Now, with that, this short-term growth rate at 13%, I'm using it over the next 10 years with a 10% discount rate and a 3% long-term growth rate. And we see my intrinsic value, $189.91, and I am using a 90% margin of safety, bringing it down to $170.92. And the stock is currently trading in the high 160s, maybe 166, 167. So with this, I do think there's an opportunity. And actually, I just took a position recently in this stock, and we'll look at those in a moment. But let's look at a few other data points here. First, PE ratio, 14.33. This is slightly below where it normally trades in that mid to high teen range. So I do see there's some opportunity here buying in based on the PE ratio. And also with a PE ratio low, and even when it drops even lower, it's a great time for the company to repurchase those shares. They're maximizing shareholder value, and they can buy it at a low PE. And then long-term debt to free cash flow, 0.99. I like seeing companies under 3. So obviously, I'm very happy with this. They don't hold too much debt. So great sign. We already discussed dividends during the financial. They don't pay any. So we'll move over to share count. And we saw in their financials that buying back shares over the past couple of years, we see just over 28% they bought back. And management says they're going to continue buying back these shares. So I'm foreseeing these outstanding share count going down, helping to increase those earnings per share. So this is another reason why I'm bullish on the company. And then net profit margins. So average over the last 10 years, 4.25%, but the last 3 years, just under 10%, 9.93. So I like seeing these last 3 years. Normally like seeing 10% or more. So they're on track for that over the last couple of years. And another major data point here for an investor, return on invested capital. I like seeing over 10%. We see they're well over 10% most of the time. 10 years ago, 12.5, but all the other years at or above 20%. So great signs here. Another reason why I'm bullish on Builders First and why I bought into the stock. So let's jump over and I'll show you my purchases into Builders First. But first, before we move on, let's just say that 13% short-term growth rate you think is a little too bullish. So let's lower that to 10% and see what we get. So with that 10% short-term growth rate, intrinsic value drops to $149.42, and 90% margin of safety brings it down to $134.48. So obviously lower from where it's currently trading in that high 160 range, but I do think 13% or maybe even 12% is more realistic. So let's look at 12% and then we'll move on. So 12%, we get the intrinsic value at 175, and with the margin of safety, it brings it down to just under $158. So in that range, still in the buying opportunity range, I think you don't get as much of a margin of safety using 12%, but I still think this is a strong company, and that's why I'm investing in it. So let's look at my purchases. At the top here are my buy-ins into Builders First. See, relatively recently at about $168 a share, and since buying in probably less than a week ago, slightly down, but the S&P hasn't really done much during this time either. But down below is the total investment. So I put in just over $3,500. So this is a smaller investment at the moment, but I am going to look at adding to this over the coming weeks and months, depending on where the stock trades at. So hopefully it stays in this 160, or obviously if it gets a little lower, that would be even better. And we can see over the past 52 weeks, it's ranged from 105 all the way up to $214. So I am optimistic that it will get back up to 200, 214, and passing it in the coming years. So let's jump over now and we'll look at my overall portfolio's performance next. Here's the portfolio's overall performance. And first off, we're not seeing Builders First, ticker BLDR. That's because it is a smaller position. So it would be down in the right-hand corner in that mix of other investments that don't display the ticker. But a few other ones to point out: NVIDIA, NVDA, they have the Q1 results coming out in about a week or so. So it's going to be a big one for the market, and I'm looking forward to that. Another one, Snap-on, SNA, recovering from a sell-off after their Q1 results. So hoping it can get back up to the high 290s or even into the 300s. I think currently it's in the high 270s after it dropped about $30 a share. And let me point out my home builders. First one, Pulte Group, PHM. I first started buying into them about 2 years ago, and it's given me a nice return. And then Toll Brothers, TOL. Again, bought into them about 2 years ago, and another good performer since then. So hopefully Builders First can continue that trend. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video, got some useful information. If so, consider subscribing. Hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.